Let's move on to the Netherlands then. Well, what are we looking at here? Aftermath of the elections.
This is a rather shocking incident of what the Turks as a state have been able to do in Dutch politics. There's a mosque in Amsterdam East which has turned into a polling station. And if you look up this article, I know it's a Dutch headline here, but it says, look at this independent polling station in East Amsterdam. And further down that page, there's pictures of Turkish flags in the windows of the mosque. There was apparently, well, not apparently, it's been reported by multiple people, there was Turkish radio playing when people went in to vote in this polling station, which was just a mosque that had been transformed for the day. There was literature out for Diyanet, which is the Turkish government's Ministry for Religious Affairs for people abroad, which I've talked about in the past on UK Column News. And then the city council were called in by disgruntled voters about the situation there. And the council came along and said, yes, you have to take the literature away, but there's no problem with having a foreign country's flag in the window of this polling station, and there's no problem with playing a foreign radio station while people are voting. Wow. So that's how serious the situation is now.
And in the meantime, Turkish minister, according to this independent headline, Turkish minister claims holy wars will soon begin in Europe after Wilders was beaten.
And this is a classic bit of baiting by the Independent, because the Independent journalist who copied this from Hürriyet, a kind of liberal Turkish opposition paper, she unquestioningly took on their translation of what the Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu had said. And in the rather poor, I should say, the rather poor Turkish translation which Hürriyet had made, they ascribed to him the sentiment that holy wars would begin. So you would assume from that he was calling for jihad in Europe or some such thing. But he didn't say jihad. He didn't even say kutsal, which is the Turkish word for holy, describing the wars. He said that the wars would be wars of deen, which is the Islamic concept of how committed are you to your religion and your way of life. So actually the point he was making was he was not threatening directly. He was saying, I predict that there will be a confrontation inevitably between immigrants who are committed to at least some way of life and a lot of the host population who don't know what they're committed to. This is another one just after the the Dutch election. Well, that's quite a Freudian slip. I'm calling it the Turkish election. That's pretty much what we've had here. This is about the ethnic Turkish member of parliament in the Netherlands for the Christian Democrat Party, roughly the equivalent of the Conservatives. Sort of centrists claiming to be conservative. And he's joined a party which has got Christian in its name, and he's not an MP, I beg your pardon. He is a city councillor in the city of Rotterdam. And he has had, at least temporarily, to throw in the towel as a councillor because he's been having death threats. Again, the Turkish state has been getting at him and has been saying, how dare you represent a party? I don't know whether they were so annoyed that it had Christian in the name. I think it was more the case that he was not standing for the party called DENK, which now has 3 members of parliament, because that has set itself up as the party which all loyal Turks in the Netherlands must vote for, which stands for Turkish interests. So again, we see a complete takeover of the Dutch political scene by the Turkish state.
And you tweeted out this. We've been trying to report on this for a week or two, but you might almost see something similar to this on a gable wall in Belfast, certain sections of Belfast anyway. But quite incredible to see King Billy with a turban.
Exactly what it is. And if you look to where the white steed is charging in a kind of romantic font, it says in the middle of the water there, "Kill for you." So that is the loyalists to the Turkish state, in this case football fans, and this was taken in 2010 when Erdogan started to be a real threat. These football fans, okay, they were playing the Greeks with whom they've got bad blood, but the picture they've got on this banner is basically the Sultan conquering Constantinople, turning it into Istanbul in 1453. And just like King Billy in Belfast, so the Sultan is on his white steed in a holy war. And so he's calling calling all the Turks in Europe, basically, because this match was in Europe, to kill on behalf of, well, okay, we would be told by some people it would be kill on behalf of Islam, but it's more specific than that. They're being called upon to kill for the Turkish expansion project, the Turkish colonization of Europe.
This one here, this is an eyewitness report. Is this from the Rotterdam riots, if we can call them that?
It is indeed from that, and I have summarized here what this eyewitness said. We had another eyewitness to the Rotterdam riots on in UK Column News when it happened a week or more ago. But this chap, who is an eyewitness to what happened, said this in an independent Dutch media interview. What I saw with my own eyes was covered up 12 hours later, so 12 hours after it happened, on the Sunday programs. The diametric opposite was reported to what I saw. The Dutch public broadcaster, NOS, also known as NPO, these NOS journalists on whom we're dependent as never before, because he says in the interview there's no local press anymore or independent press, they deliberately failed to mention hundreds of Turks yelling Erdoganite slogans, grey wolf slogans, that's extreme Turkish nationalism, and Allahu Akbar slogans dozens of times, and the press ignored their shouts of bloody Jews at the calm gendarmes. If this were a bilateral national conflict, nobody would be yelling Allahu Akbar. Our own media did exactly what the Turkish and Russian media do, propaganda, because of the forthcoming elections and because they have made a policy decision at NPO, the Dutch BBC, to, quote, foster community cohesion. And by the way, this is exactly what the German establishment media is now admitting it does as well. And this eyewitness concludes, no journalist attends an event intending to spin it. We have to look at a higher level at which talking heads they invite into the studio. Hardened rioting youths were depicted as chummy Turkish working men next door types having a polite democratic protest. NOS's entire frame is that politics is primary. Don't let Wilders in. News is secondary. RTL, which is the other establishment lefty broadcaster in the Netherlands and Benelux, he says they're not a whit better. So we're actually starting to get people, not just from the alternative media as such or from some alternative parties, just eyewitnesses who are shocked at the disparity between what they've seen, which is very angry Turkish young men who've been told exactly what to do by Erdogan, and the reality, and the picture of that, which is reported in the public broadcasters. And I think something of this happened in London in 2011, although we didn't quite have the media scene then to come out with it.
No, it's something that we don't have included here, but we'll give you a couple of minutes to discuss it. You took a trip around Amsterdam, I guess it was, recently for a Scottish video blogger, is that right?
That's right. It was actually a trip round the south side of Rotterdam, where there's only about 20% Dutch left. And it's the most recent series of videos on Millennial Woes channel. We've mentioned Millennial Woes' real name, Colin Robertson, before because he had to flee Scotland for the continent after he was really persecuted very viciously by the Daily Record and by a hack there called McEwan. And David Scott was the first to mention him. Now, I've been in touch with him since, and I was one of the men guiding him around one of these, we could say, post-Dutch urban scenes in Rotterdam. So if you look for the Rotterdam Feyenoord video, which Millennial Woes uploaded just last night, but a couple of nights ago by the time this goes out, you will see me in the commenting in the section of the stills. And what was particularly shocking was that we got to a street where all the residents are Turks, and they had hung a 2-story high Turkish flag out from the railing of their balcony to the railing of the balcony below. And as soon as we filmed this, actually Turkish grannies came out and filmed us with fairly sophisticated camera equipment. And then we were tailed back through the market as we tried to return to our base, as it were. So there is an advanced, I would say, Turkish state intelligence network operating in these suburbs. And the presence of the flag there itself is there to say, on this street, Turkey is the boss, Erdogan rules, we owe no loyalty to the Dutch political scene. This is, again, being presented as Islamification, and there's some arguments that it is that, but I see a very sharp spear tip in this, which is, again, the Turkish state using its diaspora. Erdogan knew what he was doing when he called on Turks in Europe last week to go up in the world, occupy the better neighborhoods, drive the best cars, have very comfortable houses, and make themselves the boss of Europe. The question, of course, is who is driving Erdogan? I don't believe he's there independently.
Indeed.
Can I just ask, Alex, and I don't want to put you on the spot live on this one, but does this tie in with, is it Golan or the Gulen Foundation that principally has been embedded in the USA, but to me there seems to be some cozier relationships between them. Have I got this wrong, or is that organisation possibly implicated in the Turkish movement as well?
Well, there is a tie over, Brian, but it's pretty complicated. In essence, Gulen is a CIA project. That's quite clear, and he's held in Pennsylvania as a figurehead of, you could call it, the more Islamist people who hope that he'll clean up Turkey and restore it to being a God-fearing country. And Gulen had been thought of by the NATO and CIA type planners as the way to turn the Turks into shock troops against Russia. And China in the end. But this didn't quite work. So Gulen fled to the United States at the time when Erdogan was getting off the ground, really, in politics. And he doesn't dare go back now. And he split with Erdogan. The coup which happened last summer was, as far as we can tell, was some US State Department elements using the Gulenists, so the Islamists in the schools as well, against Erdogan. And he took that as a pretext to go and clear out lots and lots of judges and academics and teachers on whom he'd had black marks for a long time because they weren't sufficiently loyal to his version of Turkish statehood. So Gulen and Erdogan have had a tiff, but they are both versions of foreign interests, largely American and Israeli, subverting Turkey and using it because of the national pride and vigor of the Turkish people, using them as a wedge between Europe and the Islamic world, and particularly between Europe and Russia.